Okay, so now the next most important thing is, as soon as we kind of decide on, the original, this is the closest. This is what we came up to after we decided to use one otter. I had it in a larger scheme, but actually we started to scale this down. So now this is looking a lot closer to what we have up here. But I tend to work a little tight sometimes, and I don't really have a lot of space in my paintings a lot, because I get caught up in these little vignettes, which I really like, and that's just what I like to do. So, but eventually got to discussing that, maybe we should open this composition up a little bit. Meaning, what I mean by open that up is, instead of having a very confined space like this, you can see that afterwards, where there's really no background to this. In this final version, I really now, instead of seeing 20 feet behind the otter, now we can see 100 yards behind the otter. So it really kind of opened the space up. That's what I mean by opening that up a little bit. So that was actually the views comments and their suggestions, which actually was dead on, because it really should have been opened up like that. So it kind of created that more, kind of a more visual space in the painting, which I think it ended up being a better painting because of that. So that's the good back and forth process with working with an art director in the sense like that, it's and expecting and telling me what they want out of a painting. So also, please, anywhere along the way, please ask questions. I don't want this to be a speech. I'd rather it be this a conversation. So, and also kind of save me here from kind of stumbling along. So, any questions at this point?
Many times I see families,
right,
just one otter.
Especially this time of year,
yeah,
or a little later in the year too, especially like that too. Yeah, it would have been nice to kind of do that whole, again, have that whole little process and go like that. That's the next one maybe, I don't know.
But every time you see them, they'll pop up in front of them, because I'm out on the water a lot.
Right.
They'll pop up in front, and I fish at them like you do birds, and they respond to that.
I haven't tried that actually, but they often do what I always call they periscope on you. So you might not even see them first before all of a sudden you're on the water, and all of a sudden this periscope comes up 20 feet in front of you, and you're like, you didn't see that coming. But then they're very curious, and they'll swim around the canoe. They'll follow the boats. They're very inquisitive, and they get territorial too. So they can.
And if they leave you can follow their oxygen going out.
Yes, you can see the bubbles, right?
If there's a log in front of you, that's where they're going to go.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Give you a periscope from the log.
Yeah, those are great sites. My wife Ann, who's back here, we've traveled, I think all but maybe 3 states in the United States, and have seen otters in half of those states. So there's otters everywhere you would think. In fact, we just came back from Arizona this spring, and there's one place we stay, and they have these ponds, but out there they call them lagoons, which I still don't understand what that means. But the first thing I do when we camp, we set up a camper, and I'm down to that pond, and within 10 minutes, every time I'm there's an otter there. I know just where he hangs out. He's got a little spillway that goes to the river, and I sit there. Sure enough, he's out there every time I'm down there. So you would think, desert Arizona, because really a half mile from where this little park is, it is full desert. But if there's a greenway and there's this river and they follow the river valleys, there's otters. And we've seen otters in Yellowstone and Florida. I've seen otter. I mean, so they're really widely distributed animals. So that's another thing about doing a piece like this too, is really trying to be familiar with your subject. And we've seen. We've seen and I've watched otters, and I've sat on the bank. Again, this one particular spot, which is perfect in this place in Arizona. What's perfect is there's 2 ponds, and there's no really kind of way to get from pond to pond. And he's got one little runway, and then once you kind of learn that, you can set your watch by him, because the way they go back and forth is really. They don't like to go over land a long distance. They don't have to, but when they do, they just kind of. And I've sat on the ground and I have otters, from me to away, they'll come right, come right to, or in between, where they're going to feed and be in water. So that's helped me a lot in making artwork like that. And all my wildlife artwork, which is pretty much all I do is wildlife art subjects, I'm only really going to paint what I know. What I've seen, what I've observed, photographed and sketched from. And there's settings also. All these settings, I think this setting is, Gary may know, this is Wolf Pond in the background there. And some of the wood was from another pond. I forget what other pond that we paddled. So again, these are all places that I know and see and are familiar with. And I'll take sketches, and I'll do sketches and photographs and just make these pictures out of them. And that's the whole idea of making composition. And again, it goes back to working with the view and working with them to get ideas of how I make a composition. Because I can paint these animals with my eyes closed, but it doesn't mean you made a good picture. You really have to make a good composition and an interesting picture like that. And that, again, that's where my help is, working with some people that have an idea of what they want. So, yes.
Once you decide on your sketch, how long does it take you to do the picture?
Once I lay this out into this size, this probably took, I don't know, maybe 5 full days of working, which is a little slower than maybe some watercolorists will do. I'm not a very fast, I don't work very wet. I mean, watercolor is one of those mediums where there's no such thing as this is how you do it. I mean, you could, from really wet and wet, blendy, really washy, really, which beautiful, or to more, tighter, more informative, even, I don't want to use the word illustrative, but it's a little more, tighter, and I want things to be more informative here than I do more expressive. But probably 5 days, straight off. 8-10 hour days is what I typically work. So, that's about the time frame I guess it takes to do that. Another thing with watercolors is unlike other mediums like oils and things like that I work with, is you really kind of have to get it right off the bat, because if you screw it up, 3/4 through, you really can't fix it. It's one of those, you just can't kind of like paint over it. Being a transparent medium, if I put another color on top of another color, I'm not hiding that bottom color. I'm what you call visually mixing colors. That red, it goes on top of the, excuse me?
You said it's called?
It's called visual, I call it visual mixing, which is what you do with watercolor, because watercolor is transparent. If I put a red, if I have a yellow on the paper and I put a red over it, where those two meet is I'm going to make more of an orange. I didn't mix that orange, but visually now, because the red and the yellow are together, you're making that orange like that. So that's what I mean by visual mixing. Other than physical, if I have oil paints, I can add my white and my red and my things, and I can mix it on my palette, and I'm going to get the color I want. A lot of times on watercolors, I won't, especially these greens, I didn't mix different color greens. A lot of times I use the same color green, just 3 or 4 layers, and all of a sudden I made a much deeper shadow green without really making a different color. If you understand what I'm saying, just because I built that color up. So that's a technique that I use a lot in watercolors. Instead of mixing, I'm gonna, your eye is gonna mix the paint. Okay, I don't know if that makes sense. Okay, any other questions? Yeah.
Okay, this is kind of silly.
No, it's not.
There's Otter Lake down below.
Yeah.
Is that named after a lot of otters that we saw, or what?
Do you know, Gary? I don't know.
I'm sure somebody saw an otter.
I'm sure someone saw an otter there at one point or another. I'm sure. Yeah.
I've never seen one when I've been driving through.
Well, it's a little busy, but I've also thought that otters were, I guess early on, these are very shy animals. They don't like people, this and that. But I've learned over the years, you know what? They're not nearly, especially when you see them in Florida. What the hell are you doing in Florida? But there's these little islands of water and ponds, and there's bobcats and otters and all these things that we think are extremely wild animals that are walking around in 2 o'clock in the afternoon with 1,000 people walking. So animals in general are extremely adaptable, and they just learn and they understand, and I think they really understand body language a lot. So if someone's like just walking down the street or walking anywhere, in deer or like that, most animals that you see understand that. So, but if you're moving a certain way, then they'll be much more, kind of edgy or a little scared like that. So, otters, what do otters eat? I don't know if I can list all there's almost anything they can fit in their mouths and catch. I mean, fish are primary, but frogs, crayfish, turtles. Sure. Eggs are a big part in certain times of year. They'll raid nests, eggs, loons, unfortunately, and ducks and things like that. Do you know what? If a loon can catch a duckling, an otter can catch a duckling, I'm sure he'd eat it. I mean, they're pretty voracious. They're in the weasel family, and weasels are just tough critters, and they eat, and they're extremely effective and skilled hunters. I've watched otters, and you probably watched otters too, fish. I don't think they can catch a fish almost any second they want to. I think they're just that good at it. Almost every time they go down, if they're serious about it, they just seem, it's effortless. And I think the Wild Center is great that if they're showing that. If you watch, one thing great about their display there is you can watch the otters underwater and how fast they move and just how quick they are. And it's just, if you're targeted by an otter, by a fish, it's not a good day probably, because you're probably going to be sushi. Yes.
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about the face? I mean, do you like your animals to always be looking right at the viewer? Is that something that you look for, or do you?
That's a great question. I've never been asked that question. If you notice this otter, he's not looking right at you. He's looking just a little off to the side. And I like to do that a lot more so than the really kind of straight on, because sometimes that's a little uncomfortable to have that eye contact. And it is for me as the artist. Sometimes I feel a little. And another thing about that, if you don't get that right as an artist, if that look isn't right, it's probably going to be awkward. It's probably just going to look wrong to people. They're going to just something, and they might not even know why it doesn't look that right. But it's a little. It's just. I think it's hard to get that just perfect. I've done it, and sometimes it's really effective when you're doing something like a startled animal or I've done it in deer paintings, and anybody that's been in the deer woods a lot. If you just break that stick and all of a sudden that animal will just, boy, is lasers, but that's a different kind of look. I really like the idea of, he's just looking off just that little bit. I mean, maybe you heard something, maybe you saw something, just that little turn that it makes a little bit, I don't want to say it's a storyline in a sense, but he's engaging somewhere in his world, and that's why I wanted to show his world. But there's something that is making him kind of just that little, oh, okay, maybe just a bird flew by, or he heard a splash, or whatever. So I tend to do that a lot more than something straight on. That's a tougher look to pull off. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Let's make sure what I missed here. Okay. All right, that's kind of pretty much how we put this together, and again how I got to this. Again, I'll lay these sketches out, and everybody can kind of see them too. I'll do that afterwards. So someone asked a little bit about the painting and kind of how long it takes to paint. There's no such thing as every painting is going to take a set amount of time. This painting actually went kind of fast for me because working with Heather and the people here, after the back and forth, I really had this picture in my head. I really kind of knew what it was going to be. I had the setting that I wanted to put. So, a lot of times when I'm really working on a painting and really thinking about a painting like that, I really had the whole thing done in my head. So a lot of times it's just like putting the painting down, and obviously there's execution and technique and things like that. But this is one of those paintings where, because we had so much back and forth, and because I we kind of really narrowed it down to what I wanted, that I really had this painting kind of done in my head. So it was, at that point, it's really fun to do, because I kind of know I know what it's going to look like. And I kind of, there's little exploration along the way, but this is one of those where, you know, I couldn't fool around much with it, because we had a design that we you know, decided on, and obviously at that point they're expecting this is what it's going to look like. So in the meantime, I can't be doing this and say, oh geez, wow, you know, I'd love to put a raven back there flying across. Well, at that point, I'm not, you know, you're not going to do stuff like that. So like I said, since we had decided, it was, you know, a very pleasurable painting to work on, because I kind of knew where I wanted to go with it, and you know, I knew the space I wanted to get in the light, kind of a softer, subtle light. So that's pretty much. Trying to think what else about working on this. Yeah, someone asked me earlier, you know, about reference material. I use photos and sketches for all my, you know, basically all my work, all my material, always, ever. That's why I'm not taking, you know, 30,000 photographs a year, because you know, I need information, and something like this too. You really have to get this right. I mean, there's pose, there's what's called attitude in birds and animals. I mean, you know, birds especially, you know, they just carry themselves a certain way. I can see a bird, and I'm sure there's others here, I know probably Gary can, you know, silhouette a bird from 100 yards away and know instantly what it is, because I don't need to see feathers or detail, or it's just, you know, a red-tailed hawk is going to be in a tree, he's going to be up and down. He's going to be near the top. There's certain things that you just learn over time about animals. A lot of that's from observation, but a lot of that is from photographs also, that I have to kind of, and the photograph part of it really is, you know, I can see how the claws are. I can see how they come out of the feet. You can see a little thing, you know, the whiskers, or certain rows of whiskers, and how they come out. I mean, to me, that's important information, because you want to get that right. Because people see that, and people that know what they're looking at see that, and you want to make sure that that's right. I had a show, many years ago at I think it was at Cornell, Cornell University, at the Lab of Ornithology. This is the bird capital of the world, basically. So I had a number of paintings on the wall, and I think I had a warbler painting. I forget what it was, maybe just a common little yellowthroat, a common warbler that probably everybody here would know. And the way I had the wings on the back, I think I showed maybe like 3 primary feathers or 4 primary feathers. Primary feathers are the last feathers on the wings, the very outer. On an eagle, you can see like almost like fingers and things like that. Those are the primary feathers. And you know, every bird has a set amount of feathers. And I drew what I drew, and this woman came up and says, "I love your painting, but you know what? They have 8 primary feathers, and you have like 7. And I was like, what am I going to say? I mean, she was right, but I mean, that's the extreme end of it. But where I'm going with that is, you know, if I had the right information, and I'm using information to, like I said, to make sure the whiskers are right. That's what some of the photographs help me with. But most of that's, you know, through observation, as far as learning. Like I said, attitude was a big thing about that. So, yes.
Did you tell that person was utterly ridiculous?
I did not. If I had a second chance, I probably would have, but at that point, I was just dumbfounded that she caught me. But you know, you're at the Lab of Ornithology, and these some heavy hitters there. So what was I going to say? So.
Can I go back to their behavior?
Sure.
For years, we've seen something pop up among some larger boulders down on our shoreline. Mm-hmm. Would it be a weasel? Would it be an otter? Hard to say.
Size is a big thing. I mean, mink are great swimmers. I've never seen mink kind of do that periscope thing though. They'll swim and they'll dive, but they don't kind of come up and look like that. They're a little more. They'll scoot up on shore and kind of, you know, they're a little faster like that. Where otters are much more curious. So if you're seeing something coming up and, you know, and kind of turning and looking and watching, there's a very good chance that that's an otter.
Do they travel in pairs?
Lots of times they're in pairs or family groups. But you know, this time of year especially, because the pups are you know, they're out with the parents, and the parents will take them out. We were at What was the pond last year that Ellie and I canoed? Shoot. I forgot. But it was this time of year. It was actually a second or third week of July. And as soon as we got out in the water, we found a group of otters. In fact, the first otter came out and saw us and again did the kind of the periscope, kind of watched us, and then kind of dove and we didn't watch anymore. But then as we paddled around, we realized that she had a couple of pups with her. And then she brought them out. After a bit, she wasn't as nervous, so she would bring those out. So this time of year, later summer, you know, everybody's out and about. They're, you know, getting fishing lessons and, you know, watching mom and doing all that kind of stuff. So it's not uncommon to see, you know, 3 or 4 otters together right now.
Where do they nest, you know, have their babies?
Do they actually dig a burrow, or are they?
Probably use an old beaver house.
They probably use, beaver houses are common. And you see them on beaver lodges a lot too. Because they'll be up and sunning, and smaller ponds, there's usually always a beaver house somewhere on it, and a lot of times they'll bring fish up and eat it, and they'll make scent marks on there too. They're very big on marking scent. It's a territorial thing, and it's you know, just I'm in the neighborhood. This is my kind of, so they'll scent mark beaver lodges a lot, and they'll make other scent lodges or scent mounds along the way too. So
They don't poop in the water.
they don't. Okay.
They don't poop in the water.
Okay. So it's always in
They
a.
have toilets.
Okay, right, they have toilets, right. Yep. Yeah, and it's a set spot that they use. Yep.
Do you have a favorite animal that you like to paint?
Wow, that's a tough one. You know, I was, for probably the first 10 years that I really concentrated heavily on just wildlife, I really did birds. I was probably strictly a bird guy. And I'm still probably 75% birds, but boy, I've had a real fun time now, you know, going crazy and doing otters and doing some moose paintings now, and I don't know what else. Can you think of anything else? Oh, bobcats. Oh, I love doing bobcats too. So, boy, favorite is really hard. I probably can't say that. As far as you know, animals go, I think probably otters and bobcats are probably my favorite right now that I've been working on the last couple of years more so. Birds, I'm really a bird of prey guy. I really love hawks and falcons especially. Owls, I can't do enough owls. I bring you owls on every chance I get to do them. So I know that doesn't answer it completely, but it's boy. I mean, look around the world. There's too many great things. It's hard to say. I like one thing. So a lot of things interest me. Anyone else? Well, that's pretty much what I was going to talk about as far as the making of the painting. So, yeah, did you have a question? Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's okay. So, okay, I'll have sketches up here if you want to look and see how I kind of did the process. You can ask me questions about them as you see them. Otherwise, thank you very, very much for taking the time to come out and see me tonight. Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay.
So if you people at home want to see the sketches.
Sure.
So maybe we can hold those up really quick for people.
Oh, sure, wherever they can, I don't know if they can zoom in on them.
Yeah, Travis can zoom in.
Okay.
Also, Wendy says hi, she's at home. Your sister.
Okay. Like one at a time, or how do you want me to do this?
Is that good, Travis?
Just tell me how you want me to help you here.
Maybe come a little bit.
Okay.
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 So thank you, David.
Okay, thank you.
So
now we have joining us from the Wild Center, we have Nicole here. Nicole, are you there? I don't know if I'm far away from
I'll get out of your way here.
We'll give her a minute. Nicole, whenever you're ready. Here she is.
I rambled. That's good.
Until they look at the work, they can't tell.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Wild Center. So nice to have you guys joining us today. I'm going to move us over just a little bit and evening time here in the exhibit hall. So things are going to be just right over to the side of the exhibit where the otters are hanging out. All right. And there we have our 3 youngest North American river otters. So thank you all for joining us and thank you for that wonderful presentation. This evening I'm really looking forward to sharing some of the natural stories of our river otters with all of you, as well as sharing my favorite part of how nature and art intersect here at the Wild Center. So what you can expect for this program is a little bit of natural history. I also have some special surprises for my otters over here. It's a little late in the day, they're still on exhibit, so I have their dinner for them, as well as some live fish for you all to see how they interact with their prey items as we discuss how otters are so amazing. So river otters are our top species of predator here in the Adirondacks. They are what we call apex predators. And I can see some of you guys in the audience, so why don't you go ahead and give me a thumbs up if you can hear me all right. Okay, I'm seeing some thumbs. Excellent, excellent. Then we'll continue on. So North American river otters have earned a top spot in our ecosystem in the Adirondacks. They are absolutely incredible predators, but there's special characteristics, things that we call adaptations, that allow them to be so successful here as hunters in our harsh Adirondack climate and habitat. So one of the first things you're going to notice about our otters as they move around is that they're excellent swimmers. Otters are really well built for the water. So here in front of me I have an otter pelt, and this otter pelt is a pretty good representation of their general shape. They're absolutely hydrodynamic. These otters are built for moving fast through the water. They've got this long torpedo-shaped body, a very long tail. It's about 1/3 the length of their entire body. It's just absolutely muscular. And they use that to help them swim. And their head is also shaped kind of like a wedge. It's flat. Look at their skull, and it's flat, so they can zip right through the water. Now, our otters, they are here all year long. And they're going to be active in the winter. They don't go to sleep like the bears do. Instead, they're going to be active all year long. So I know you guys are a little bit downstate, but if any of you have been to the Adirondacks in the winter, then you know it is a brutally cold place. The common temperatures can reach down into the negatives, like -20, -25, especially in the month of February. So it is absolutely inhospitable out there, but the otters are going to be playing, hunting, doing the usual thing all throughout the year. And that's thanks to this really what is a coat of armor. Otters, when you look closely at them, and it's kind of hard to get close, they're really sneaky and kind of elusive out in the wild. But if you get close and you look at their fur, I'm going to bring you guys to the camera. There's actually 2 layers of fur on an otter pelt, and it really is like a suit of armor. Oh my gosh, you guys are so cute. So I'm seeing all 3 of the otters wrestling over here. That's one of their favorite activities as they await their little dinner snack. But this otter pelt functions much like some of the gear that we use to stay comfy and warm in the wintertime. So when I get cold in the winter, I put on a nice fleecy jacket. So I'll pop this on, but when I put this jacket on, just like the otters when they wear their fur, it's not just my skin and the fabric, right? Inside, in between, is the air that is being trapped against my skin. And as I move around and move about my habitat, I'm going to be creating body heat, and And that's going to be trapped in this jacket, trapped in the air to keep me nice and toasty warm, keeping it close to my skin. And that's what's happening to the otters, too. And as they swim around, see if we can get more slowly to jump in. Good job. I'm not sure if you guys are able to see it, but when they jump down into the water, you always see these bubbles coming out behind them. And no, they're not fart bubbles. People ask me that all the time. It's the air that is trapped inside their fur, expelling from the pressure of water on their bodies. You can see some of that air releasing. But that's just the undercoat. The second layer of fur is a waterproofing layer. And then they're like, okay, Miss Nicole, what's going on? Otters spend 60% of their day in the water. They're made for swimming. But even though they spend that much time in the water, their fur is so thick that they're not even going to get wet underneath. Their skin is going to stay totally dry. So if you guys like to go swimming, or you spend however long washing the dishes at home, and your hands are nice and wet, they get really pruny and wrinkly, right? You look like a raisin. Well, our otters, if that happened to them, that makes your skin very sensitive, much more prone to abrasions or injuries, cuts, and that sort of stuff. So that protective layer of fur not only keeps them dry, but it keeps their skin healthy and safe. So that outer layer has a bit of waterproofing, like a rain jacket. So when I put on my rain jacket over my fleece here, I'm not only keeping warm, but I'm keeping waterproof. So the same thing goes for the otters. And as long as they are grooming themselves constantly and spreading those natural oils throughout their fur is going to stay relatively waterproof. And as soon as they pop out of the water, it only takes a quick couple of minutes for them to dry right off. And that coat of armor allows them to survive and stay in such a harsh habitat here in the Adirondacks. If it wasn't for that winter coat, they'd be out of luck. It gets too cold. But the winter coat wasn't just important for North American river otters. The pelts of the North American river otter, being so thick and luxurious, was also very valuable for people as well. So for a long time, otters in New York State were trapped. And it got to a point where nearly all the otters had disappeared from the Adirondacks because they were trapped so heavily, because the fur was so valuable. So, like several decades ago, they instituted a ban, a moratorium on the trapping of otters in New York State for a period of time. And what they did was actually live trap river otters from other parts of New York, like downstate, for example, to reintroduce them into the Adirondack Park. And that has been one of our most successful conservation stories ever, you guys. Otters have made such a comeback in the Adirondacks, and their numbers and populations are so strong now that there is even, again, a small season for trapping to maintain that cultural heritage in the hunting community. So they have really risen from the ashes, so to speak, in the Adirondacks, and now they're really common. And these guys are just hanging up on the rock out here being as cute as can be. They're my perfect little stars for this sort of thing. But even though they struggled, now the North American river otter, the populations are so good, they're actually the only otter species in the whole entire world, and there's 13 different kinds. But the North American river otter is the only one whose population is not decreasing, it's not declining. It's either staying stable or increasing across most of their range. So they are doing the best out of all of our wild otters across the globe. But it isn't just this fur that gives them that competitive advantage. You guys notice I'm stepping away. I've got a little prop box here to share with you all. So they have a couple other unique things about them that give them that advantage. One of the things you're seeing them demonstrate right now, their swimming capabilities. So when I go swimming, and I like to swim, but I'm not really that good at swimming, so I do the doggy paddle, right? You guys are probably all familiar with that. I call it the otter paddle these days. But when I do the doggy paddle, and if you guys go ahead in the audience and kind of mimic what I'm doing, when you do the doggy paddle, what are you doing? You're pushing your fingers together, right? Because if I was trying to swim like this, I would sink. But instead, if I close my fingers together, I'm creating more surface area on my hand to be able to pull the water and propel myself forward and stay afloat. But the otters don't have to worry about doing finger exercises. Instead, they've got their little flippers built right in. So they have webbed hands and feet which means they have little bits of skin connecting all their fingers and toes. And that gives them the ability to swim really fast. So they're super speedy in the water, and they're able to turn on a dime. But it isn't just their feet and their body shape, that gives them this incredible swimming agility and mobility. Their tail is a huge part of what helps them move in the water. I mentioned before with that tail, and you can see with these guys, it's about 1/3 the length of their body. It's absolutely huge, and it's really muscular. And that tail really acts like a rudder on a boat for them to change direction. So they swish it side to side as they're moving in the water to be able to turn their bodies. That way they can turn quick right on a dime and be able to match the fish's ability, which is their primary prey item, fish of all kinds, to turn on a dime. Because fish, if you're a fish and you're swimming for your life to get away from an otter, you're probably not going to swim in a straight line, right? You're going to be zigzagging everywhere, trying to avoid those really strong jaws. So the otter being able to match a fish's ability to swim quick and turn directions very quickly is going to be essential for their hunting success so they can hopefully get a meal while they're out there. So before we go on and talk a little bit more about a couple other unique things about our otters that really sets them apart from other animals, I'm going to take a moment here to go ahead and put some of their enrichment in. So I mentioned we have some of their dinner fish as well, which I have chopped up. We've got some smelt, pollock, and trout that I'm going to be putting into them there. And then I also have, I've got 3 otters here, so I've got 3 live fish to put into the exhibit with them so they can show you and demonstrate some of these adaptations that I'm talking about. So when I do that, what I'm going to do with you guys is I'm going to bring you down to the exhibit. You're going to have more of an underwater view. And I'm just going to ask that you take a quiet moment to watch and observe and enjoy for a few moments while they hopefully are able to catch their fish. And fair warning, Scarlett, the little female, she really likes to play with her food, so to speak. So it should be a good time for them. I don't know, all like giving me the eye. So I'm going to bring you guys over here with me. And we can check out the rest of the exhibit too while we're at it. This is the whole H2O water side of the exhibit. The otters don't just spend time in the water. They are well adapted to land. So we do also have a land side of the exhibit. You'll notice the den back there where they cuddle up and take a nap. Oh, you guys are just so sweet. Look at you. So we're going to bring you guys down at this end, and I'm sure they're going to follow me. They know that something's up. We're going to flip our camera here. Let's see. There we are. Oh, hello. All right, so we're just going to adjust and make sure we've got a good view for all of you. Oh, beautiful. How does that look for you guys? Now, so I just saw a really good example of all those bubbles that we were talking about before. Those bubbles, and you can see it coming up on Scarlett here as she swims. That's the air escaping out of their fur. That's a really great demonstration of that. So without further ado, I'm going to give you guys a quiet moment to watch and enjoy as I put in some of their food. And I think first and foremost, I'm going to go ahead and pop in those live fish for the otters. So we're stationed at the end of the exhibit. This is going to be the best spot for you guys to see, although they're likely to chase the fish all crazy everywhere. So keep your eyes peeled as they move about the exhibit. Hi. Yes, here we go. So these otters do make pretty quick work of their fish. I'm going to bring y'all a little bit closer to the other side here. So when otters catch their food, they're going to bring it to land where they can enjoy it more easily. Now, as they're moving around and hunting these fish, they're going to be experiencing their world with all the same senses that we have. So when we think of how we interact and experience the world, we have 5 senses, right? Our sense of sight, smell, hearing, touch, and taste. So the otters are experiencing their world in the same way, but they're going to be using those senses a little bit differently. So when they're swimming in the water, otters, they're not going to be sniffing much, right? They're holding their breath and they'll blow bubbles out their nose. So that cancels out that sense. They're not smelling underwater, so to speak. They're also not hearing fish. I don't know if you've ever tried to listen to a fish, but they're pretty quiet anyhow. If y'all have ever been swimming and you like swimming, then you may have experienced a swimmer's ear or water in your ear, which can be incredibly painful, causing an ear infection and whatnot. Now, the otters, lucky enough for them, they don't have to worry about that because it's not like they could go and get those little eardrops from the doctors out in nature. So for them, they're lucky enough that their ears have muscles in them that automatically close. So it closes up their little ear holes when they go under the water. And they don't even have to think about it. You know, it's just like you and I blinking. We don't think about it. So when they dive under, those little ear holes are going to close right up so no water gets in there with that muscle. Very impressive. But again, that's taking away another one of our senses that they're experiencing the world with. So they're not smelling their prey. They're not hearing their prey. They certainly aren't going to taste the fish until they get them with those big sharp teeth. So that leaves behind their vision abilities and their sense of touch. Now, the otters actually have what I call like X-ray vision, pretty much. And that's because when they are going underwater, they have a secret little adaptation that helps them see and protects their eyes. So they can't go to good old Walmart and buy a pair of goggles to swim around with. Instead, they have their goggles built right into their eyes. So when you look at each other in the audience, if you look at each other's eyes, you're going to see that you have 2 eyelids, one on the top and one on the bottom. These otters have the same thing, but instead they've got 3. So they have a top and a bottom lid that closes over, but they also have this strange and unique clear eyelid, and that is called a nictitating membrane. Basically a fancy science word to describe a clear bit of skin that automatically deploys over the eyes of the otter when they jump in the water. So this nictitating membrane is present in a lot of different animals. Snakes have this special eyelid, as well as a number of birds, especially birds of prey, have nictitating membranes. And lots of our other reptiles do as well. So that helps to keep debris and stuff out of their eyes and those sensitive bits. So it's kind of like that built-in goggle to keep them nice and protected. Now that leaves their sense of touch. And let's go see. We'll spin this around here quick for a second to see if anybody is on the land side. So I can give you an up-close view of their sensory organs for their sense of touch. So the otters are going to be swimming in water, of course, and you'll notice that, like, our exhibit's pretty clean. We do a really good job. We clean it every day. We've got filters and all that jazz, so we don't really have to worry about the water being dirty or cloudy and whatnot for our animals. Instead, we're being here, they've got lights, it's all clear. It's really easy for them to see and find those fish. For us, though, if you've been out swimming or paddling in the Adirondacks or really any of our rivers and lakes, you're going to notice that, like, it's pretty dirty. You can't always see to the bottom. There's all sorts of debris, stuff floating in the water column. So it can actually be, like, kind of hard to see. And out there, sure, you've got the sunshine, but Today could be a rainy day, could be a snowy day, so the water column isn't necessarily going to be so easy to see through. Even though they have that nictitating membrane, and I kind of call it X-ray vision, they're still going to have difficulty seeing with really turbid conditions in the water. So they are going to rely on their sense of touch. So hopefully they'll come up to the land side in a little bit, and I'll show you guys a closer view. Here we go. Come here, baby. So let's take a look at these guys. Oh, hi, Lo Snowlay. Hi, buddy. So you're looking at Lo Snowlay's sweet face here, and you're going to notice his whiskers. Oh, yeah, get a nice chin rub. You're going to notice those whiskers, but they aren't just for being cute, although that is one of their functions. They're adorable. Those whiskers are that sensory organ. So they have a special name, too. They're called vibraceae. And that probably sounds like a word you're a little familiar with, vibraceae. It kind of sounds like vibrates or vibrations. And that's what those things are doing. Those little whiskers are picking up vibrations in the water as the fish are moving around. So when something moves in the water, it's not just the animal moving in the water. The water and stuff is going to move around it. So as a fish is swimming, and the otter hopefully has found this fish, they're chasing it, pursuing it, might not be such great clarity for them to swim and see the fish, but with those little vibraceae right on the end of the business end, here are the teeth, they're able to really pinpoint their fish, find them and hone in and get their dinner. But all of these amazing adaptations would be for naught if it weren't for one special superpower that these otters have. And so I'm going to ask you guys, go ahead and say to each other, how long do you think an otter can hold their breath for? Pretty long time. So most of the time, otters are going to be spending about 2 to 2.5 minutes holding their breath. And like that doesn't sound like a long time, but trust me, if you try it, it is. You can't do it. And the craziest thing about their ability to hold their breath is that their heart is also very special, because whether the otter is just moseying around on the side of the river, sniffing, going to the bathroom, whether it's that or they're swimming all crazy, swimming for their life, trying to get their dinner, their heart rate is going to stay the same. So when they take in oxygen, they take in a breath, and they go and hold it underwater, even though they're swimming all crazy, they're going to use that oxygen in their lungs at the same rate. So right now, I've been just talking and relaxing with you guys this evening. So if I tried to hold my breath, I could probably get to about 45 seconds to a minute or so. But if I stood up and did a bunch of jumping jacks and got my heart rate up to kind of simulate an otter swimming all crazy after a fish, I wouldn't be able to hold my breath for 20 seconds probably, because my heart rate is higher, so the oxygen is being used in my body more quickly. So the otter's ability, that natural built-in ability for their heart rate to stay pretty level the whole time, gives them that #1 competitive advantage to be our apex predator here in our Adirondack watershed ecosystems. So they are overall absolutely incredible animals, you guys. They have earned a spot at the top here in the North Country and across the world. So river otters are one of our keystone species as well. They show us that an ecosystem is healthy. In order to have a top predator like an otter be able to survive in its environment, everything else under the rest of that trophic level, everything else lower down into the food chain has to be sustainable, has to be there and in place in order to support these otters. So they are kind of like an indicator of the health of an environment, because if there isn't a good baseline for a big predator like this, then they're just not going to be there. So river otters here in the Adirondacks are not only a sign of our success, but our incredible diversity and the sustainability of our natural systems here in the park, in our 6 million acre backyard wilderness in the Adirondacks. So with that, folks, I'm going to start wrapping up by giving the otters the rest of their dinner. We made them work pretty hard for their live fish. And now I'm going to reward them with the rest of their diet so that they can enjoy that and swim around while we talk a little bit about my favorite part of how nature and art intersect at the Wild Center. So I'm going to bring you back over to the other end where we were before, so you can get that nice underwater view of the otters engaging with their dinner. And of course, when I shift them back behind the scenes, I do have a little bit more treats to reward them for going back to bedtime behind the scenes. So the space that you're actually seeing today is only about 1/3 of the entire space that our otters have. So this exhibit is connected to their holding area, which is where they have their individual enclosures. Bring you down like this. Here we go. And they also have access to an outdoor play yard. And so that is outside. They go out and about in all the elements, especially Louis, our older otter who you're not seeing this evening. He just loves the snow. So they get to experience all the natural seasons and have a diverse amount of spaces that they get to go in and experience. So they all take turns going throughout different parts of the museum. So I'm going to take a moment now to go ahead and pop in their food. Yeah, they can tell something's up, huh, babies? So I'll give you guys a quick view. They've got some smelt and pollock and trout in here. We get this fish from our restaurant distributor for our museum cafe. So it's the same kind of fish you would get if you came to Tucker Lake and went to our Friday night fish fries in town. So when I think of nature and art at the Wild Center, one of the first things that comes to my mind, being part of the education team and the animal care staff, some of the work that we do does involve exhibit development and design. And without art, who would look at our exhibits? If they were just big blocky chunks, paragraphs of text, that wouldn't be very attractive for visitors. So when I think of art, I think about how we communicate our information in a way that is appealing and pleasing and engages the visitor, intrigues them into learning more and looking closer and taking a moment to stop and really enjoy our exhibit space. So I think about the composition of our exhibit hall and how things are formed and all the work that goes into creating our signage. It's a perfect example of how nature and art are married together and how art helps to support science and education by making it attractive and accessible to people. The beauty of the natural world is only one portion of what we offer here, but also the science, learning, and education, and focusing on the Adirondacks and our ecology comes into play with how we present that information. And one of my favorite examples where we have drawn some direct inspiration from nature is, and I'm going to quickly turn around our camera again so you guys can see. One of our inspirations, of course, are the otters. And if you were to look at a map of our site, you're going to see that we are very close to the Racket River. And what do rivers do? They curve and swerve and all that. And sometimes, as rivers age, they get some serious bends in them. And if you look right off of our property, you're going to see this weird swirly thing called an oxbow in the river, which basically describes a piece of river that got a little pinched off through thousands of years of deposition of sediments as the river flows. Anytime that water is moving across a landscape, it's not just the water that's moving. Sediments move with them as well. So silts and sands and soil particles all move and shape our rivers and our aquatic ecosystems that these otters live in. And of course, with otters being our kind of like our front-facing ambassador animal, we wanted to draw direct inspiration from the otters and kind of tailor it into the river. So I'm going to come a little bit closer to the camera and show you our very special Wild Center logo. So when you look at this logo here, you see the form and the composition is an entire circle to kind of symbolize the connected nature of the natural world here in the Adirondacks and elsewhere, of course. You'll also notice that the otter has a little fish for its food resources, as well as a cattail for its habitat. But when you look at the map, this is basically the exact shape. This big curve on our river looks just like our otter logo. So we drew inspiration from the natural world, the landscape, as well as our ambassador animals, and blended that together to create our brand here at the Wild Center. Now, this logo is now internationally recognized thanks to all of our virtual programming outreach. So thank you so much for joining us today for this virtual experience with our otters. You guys are part of what brings nature and art together in the rest of the world, and for me, here at the Wild Center. So with that, everybody, I'm going to turn it back to your hosts. I hope you have a lovely evening. And if you have a chance, come and visit me and the otters in person sometime. I am so happy to announce that the indoor portion of our building is reopened to the public. So you get to see the otters in their awesome Otterfall exhibit with the waterfall, and you get to experience some unique stuff going on and some really special installations, art installations here on site at the Wild Center, 7 days a week. So I look forward to a beautiful summer here with the otters, and I hope that I get to see all of you sometime here at the Wild Center. Thank you so much to the View for having us. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time.
We definitely tell you to go to the Wild Center and check out the otters in person. And if you have a chance to come back and check out David's exhibition. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you.
I'm going to give you this before I forget.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Very good.
Yeah.
Why? Because you just want to.
Yeah, because this is how I think.
Or this one.
Kind of thinking as I sketch here, so I want
Did you see
that
the
to
otters
look
and everything?
Yeah.
Really fine.
Yeah.
Stylus.
These are just pencils.
Is this the process most artists follow?
Yes, it is. Yeah, especially when you're working with, a client. I heard it call these clients, but it is in a sense.
Yeah.
Because, they have a set assignment and they want a set product in a sense that, so you really do need to kind of work your way through it this way.
I watch, I forget to charge it.
Very good job.
Well, thanks for coming still.
They kind of have a droopy mouth, don't they?
It's kind of funny.
Yeah,
Just a
kind
little-
of.
It's a musical turn to their